Imagine being born into darkness, not the kind that comes with nightfall, but the kind that devours your freedom before you take your first breath. The year is 1864. The Civil War rages across America, and somewhere in the shadowed edges of Mississippi, a $3 transaction seals the fate of a newborn child, a crying infant. Sold like an object, his name would be Thomas Freeman, a name that history tried to bury, but destiny refused to forget. What began as the story of a helpless slave child would soon become a chilling and powerful saga of vengeance, resilience, and redemption. Tonight, we uncover the haunting truth behind the boy who was once worth less than a loaf of bread, yet became the man who changed the course of American history. Thomas Freeman was born at the crossroads of horror and history, a child whose first breath was greeted not by love, but by a transaction. In 1864, the air of Mississippi was thick with smoke and blood as the Civil War tore through the land, yet even amidst the chaos, the machinery of slavery continued to turn. On a cold morning in a crumbling auction yard, a crying infant was placed on a wooden table. His value was determined not by his innocence or his life ahead, but by the few coins a desperate man could offer. $3. That was the price of Thomas Freeman's existence, the price stamped into his destiny before he could even open his eyes to the world. His mother's scream echoed through the crowd, but it changed nothing. She was dragged away, her wrists bleeding from the shackles, while her child was handed over like an object, an exchange between monsters dressed as men. The man who bought him was a plantation owner known only as Barrow, a name feared by those who worked his cursed land. The Freeman plantation had fallen into ruin, but Barrow was desperate for control, and he believed the boy's strange birthmark, a scar shaped like a flame on his shoulder, was a sign of power. Superstition ran deep in the South, and whispers spread that the infant carried something unholy. The overseers spoke of cursed births, of children who saw beyond the veil of life, and some even claimed the scar burned brighter when the moon rose. But Barrow saw only a tool, a symbol to control those who feared him. He raised the child among the dying, forcing him to work, to obey, to live in silence. Yet something in Thomas's gaze disturbed even the cruelest of men. He did not cry when beaten, did not flinch when the whip cracked. As he grew, strange things began to happen around him. Tools would vanish, animals would turn restless, and some nights the old slave quarters echoed with voices no one could see. The others whispered that the spirits of the dead spoke to him, that the ghosts of the enslaved found a vessel in the boy with the fire mark. He began to remember things he had never seen, the names of those who had perished on that land, the pain of mothers who had lost their children, the prayers whispered into the soil. Barrow's fear turned to rage. He beat the boy, locked him away, tried to erase the strange light that burned behind his eyes. But by the time Thomas reached 12, even the men who enforced Barrow's cruelty avoided the boy's shadow. Soldiers who passed through the region spoke of a child who could find the buried dead, who could point to the graves of those never mourned. His name became a ghost story, passed from campfire to campfire, a tale of a child sold for $3 who could not be broken by whip or chain, a boy who stared into the heart of evil and saw something waiting on the other side. After the war ended, the world that had enslaved Thomas Freeman began to crumble, but for him, freedom was not the end of his story. It was the beginning of a haunting journey that blurred the line between man and myth. The South lay in ruins, cities burned to ash, and the ghosts of war walked among the living. Thomas, now a young man with eyes that seemed older than time itself, wandered through those ruins, searching for something no one else could see. He carried with him the memories of the dead, not as nightmares, but as voices whispering through the wind. Every town he entered felt the chill of his presence. Every night he spent beneath the stars seemed to awaken something ancient in the soil. People called him many names: the fire-marked wanderer, the grave finder, the revenant of the South. Some said he was blessed, others swore he was cursed. Thomas had made it his mission to uncover what others wished to forget. He walked through abandoned plantations, following the cries only he could hear, unearthing graves that had no markers, only sorrow. He did not bury the past, he revealed it. At times, his discoveries were met with gratitude from the newly freed, who saw in him a messenger of truth. But to the powerful, to the remnants of the men who once owned lives as property, Thomas Freeman was a threat, a reminder that justice could not be silenced by time. Strange things followed in his path. Entire families of former overseers disappeared without trace. Mansions stood empty with their doors wide open and their fires still burning. Chains were found hanging from trees in perfect silence, swaying though there was no wind. And in every town touched by his shadow, someone always whispered that the ghost of a $3 slave had come to collect what was owed. No one could explain how he always knew where the hidden graves were. He would walk to a field, stop and place his hand upon the earth. Then he would speak a name, one that no one had spoken in years, and before dawn the soil would reveal bones that proved him right. Some said he was guided by spirits. Others claimed the fire-shaped scar on his shoulder glowed in the dark when he was near death or injustice. The truth was, Thomas himself didn't know where his power came from. He only knew that he couldn't rest until the voices in his head went quiet, until the cries from beneath the ground faded into peace. He became a legend wrapped in fear. Children were warned not to speak his name after sunset, and men who once wore Confederate uniforms crossed themselves at the sound of it. Wherever he went, people felt both terror and awe. To the broken, he was hope. To the guilty, he was the reckoning they had escaped for too long. And as America tried to rebuild itself on the graves of the forgotten, Thomas Freeman kept walking, with the dead as his companions, and the truth as his only weapon.